Justyn's car's back with us for a few days, and one of the jobs we've got to do whilst it's here, one of the jobs I've got to do, the car is back with us for Justyn to swap gearbox and do Justyn bits with it on the lift while we've got a lift free. But one of the jobs that I've got to do is finish off the exhaust that we started about a year ago when we fitted the turbo kit. So we tried to fit all the turbo kit in a day, which, you know, as these things, you know, it didn't quite go to plan. Took a bit longer than we anticipated. A few problems that we had to kind of iron out. It was a turbo that we've never used before. So yeah, we need to finish the exhaust off. It's got the full downpipe to like the kind of center silencer section, which is fine. I may change this flexi for a soft style flexi because we've got some in stock now and we didn't have at the time. A soft style flexi is always better on something like this, you know, kind of high horsepower car. You know, spends a lot of its time in under high load on a track. So we might swap that, but before we kind of get into that, we'll talk about what we're going to do. So it's a 3.5 inch downpipe that's on it, and the plan was always to make a full 3.5 inch system. But because Justyn competes in time attack at the minute, he needs a cat. And there's loads of different ways of doing cats on like fairly high horsepower cars. Basically, the higher the horsepower you go, the fewer cats will actually kind of be rated for that power. You can get loads of cats that are rated for quite low horsepower, so like 3 or 350 horsepower. And you can get them that are rated for a lot more, but they just start to get a lot more expensive. So one thing you can do to kind of half the load on the cat is to basically run two. So that's what we're going to do. We'll run two cats parallel, and we'll have one pipe feeding two cats and then two pipes feeding back out into one again. And that's a really good way of using less expensive cats to achieve the same as a more expensive cat. And it just means that the car's then fully legal wherever he goes. He doesn't have to worry about them checking it and him not being allowed to compete or whatever. I mean, I think most cars in time attack probably don't have a cat, even though they should. I don't know, I don't make the rules. Seems a bit silly to me. You either have to have it, or you don't have to have it and you don't have it. It's one or the other. But yeah, it's just how it is. So we're going to put some cats in. We've got these G-Sport cats, which are pretty good. We've used these on loads of things. We use a different version of this one in our Corsa exhaust. And then we use a bigger version of this in our Astra H exhaust system. So we know they work. We've been using these for a long time now. They became a bit hard to get hold of at one point, but they're available kind of easily again now. So that's pretty much the first thing we've got to do. We've got this V-band section here, which is where I've stripped off the old exhaust. We need to get this propped up at the right height, figure out where we're going to put the cats, which is probably somewhere here, I think. Because we want to keep them as close to the front of the car as possible. I would normally say put the cats as close to the back of the car as you can, because then they have to do the least amount of work. But in Justyn's application, because he's got like a standard rear boot floor, there's really nowhere to put the cats at the back of the car. So it's going to be easier just to put them right here. You know, we're not really going to gain much putting them, you know, further down the tunnel or here. You know, we may as well just put them in more or less the stock location. If Justyn ever wants to sell the exhaust and the turbo kit, you know, it's more suitable for, you know, somebody else then if he ever wants to switch it out, rather than building something that's so specific to a kind of racing car. Because Justyn still uses it as a road car as well. Another reason why it needs to be sports car and road legal, because obviously it already is. Yeah, so they're going to go somewhere there, and then we're going to put a silencer in behind, a fairly big silencer in behind, and then we're going to put another silencer in the stock position where it would normally be between the wheel well and the spring, and then it'll come out into a centre exit as normal. Justyn was talking about getting rid of the rear diffuser, which I'm not sure if he is going to do that or not, but we'll confirm that with him by the time we get that far down the car. And then we might also add in another silencer which runs along the back of the car as a kind of option for like quiet track days and stuff like that. So yeah, it just leaves him with, you know, all the options then. So first thing is going to be making the pipe work to go with these. We need to cut up some bends and get, you know, two 2-into-1 sections that suit these cats so they can sit side by side. So what we're going to do with this part is we're going to take 4 45-degree bends. These are just like off-the-shelf bends. And we're going to figure out how far apart they need to be to get the cats. We want just a bit, you know, a small gap. We could weld them together, but, you know, given that they will heat up, and this is where the heat will be, the more you heat stainless steel, the more it grows. So if we put them together, they'll just grow apart, and it'll probably just inevitably end up cracking or, you know, breaking a weld somewhere. So what we're going to do is we'll just cut these straight down here to give us like 2 kind of Y pieces, and then we'll put a 3.5-inch piece on either end. Right, so I've got a couple of these cut now, and you'll see that that's basically how we're going to do it, and they'll go into the cats there, and that'll separate the cats. We'll probably just sand a bit more off these yet and get them a little bit closer together, but that's just, you know, it's better to cut not enough off and then trim a bit more off after than it is to cut too much off, obviously. But yeah, we can get them a little bit closer together yet. That'll put them, you know, something like that. And we get them a bit closer together than that. It'll just save a bit more space in the tunnel. So yeah, we'll cut the other 2 down, get them cleaned up, get them tacked up. Then we'll cut the end off so it'll swage out for 3.5-inch tube, and then we can just weld it all up as one thing and kind of mount it like a silencer. Matt's got it welded up, and now I kind of wanted to keep it quite far forward, but I've pretty much realised that's not going to happen without losing a bit of ground clearance in the middle of the car. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stick it at the back. Sometimes there's only a few minutes between me speaking on these videos, but that might be a few hours, and that's long enough to change your mind sometimes, and that's what's happened here. So we're gonna go for putting that about there, with just a small silencer in between. So we'll move that V-band up here, and there'll be a small silencer welded into this section, basically. So now it's just a case of figuring out what length of silencer we need. I've got my tape, and then figuring out what gap I've got. I want this quite far forward if I can help it. It'll make getting that bending a bit easier. So I've got there a gap of 10 inches. So that allows me to fit in pretty much a 12-inch silencer. Yeah, I can get about 12-inch, probably bigger, but 12-inch will be enough in the middle of the car before the cats. And then that whole section is going to be V-band in and out, basically. So that's the next thing to do. We need to make up a 12-inch long, 3.5-inch bore silencer, which is going to go in between that V-band and there, so it'll just fit in between there, and it'll extend that right out. And then we'll put another V-band on the end there, and then we can put some hangers on it. So we've got the silencer and the dual cat section welded together now with the V-band on the end of it, and we've like propped it up in the tunnel where it wants to go, and that means that now we can put the hangers on. We want to put hangers on before we go too far, because it's better if you can to get the exhaust kind of self-supporting rather than build the whole exhaust and then put the hangers on it after, because then some of them don't tend to line up and some of them support more weight than others. So we'll put hanger brackets on it now. The front ones are going to be easy because we can just take them straight off the silencer, so we can just, you know, tack them on the car, and that'll take the weight of that, no problem. The rear ones, we might be able to, obviously we've got a bend to go on here yet, to go round under the fuel tank, but we don't really want to weld too much onto this piece of tube, because if we weld hanger brackets on there with nothing on the end of it, it'll just warp all that shape and it won't be round. So hopefully we can get away with just tacking on there for now, but I might at this point just put the front hangers on, tack that bend on and a piece of straight, weld that up, and then put the hanger brackets on the back. I think that'll probably work out better. Else we'll end up, say, just kind of heating the tube up too much when we weld it, and it'll all go out around, and then we won't be able to line up a bend very well. So that's probably the next thing to do. Cut some tube for those front hangers, and then cut a bend in a piece of tube for the back here. But we're also going to need to put a joint in. So I think what we'll probably do is we'll either put like if we've got room for a V-band, put a V-band in. If not, we'll just put a slip joint in there. Slip joint will also give us a bit of adjustability that we might need. So that's the next thing to plan out now. I know we need a 22-degree bend there because I made a few Astra exhausts in the past. So we know we need a 22-degree bend, and then we'll just get a piece of offcut to start with, just to take us down in that direction to figure out where we're going to put the joint in. Got those hanger brackets welded up at the front now, so we're on to putting this joint in at the back. We could get away with putting a slip joint in, but given that the rest of the exhaust is already on a V-band, we may as well just keep that on. And it just so happens that we've ended up with basically the perfect gap to put a V-band in here, so it tends to make sense. So that'll go in there, and then we've got this 22-degree piece and an offcut on there at the minute. So really the next thing to do now is to get this V-band welded onto this cat section, this cat and silencer section, get the V-band welded onto this 22-degree bend with the piece of pipe welded on it. Then we can put it all back on the car and figure out these final hanger brackets. I'm tempted, well, I don't think there's a better way at this point. Put them on this piece or put them on that piece. There's pros and cons to both really. The problem you tend to have is, if you put them on this piece, because it's quite a tight bend, you don't really have much room to actually get the hanger bracket in without the bushing touching the exhaust, and this exhaust will get quite hot, and these Powerflex bushes do like to melt. So we may end up doing like one on one side, one on the other. I don't know. We'll come to that once we've got it all welded up. So we've got the V-band and bend all welded up. Our pipe's still a bit long this end, but we'll come back to that and trim it down once we've kind of done these hanger brackets. I just want to get this middle section finished off. So what we're going to do now is we'll pull these bushes in here so they're at a slight angle. It's getting quite tight against here, but it pretty much always happens on Astras, especially with 3.5-inch pipe work. You basically can't change where that hanger point is unless you mount another one. On 3-inch tube, you just about get away with it, but you know, 3.5-inch tube, it gets even worse. I could put the hanger bar down here, but realistically, it's not going to keep that bush any further away from the exhaust, and they need to be pulled in a little bit. If they're straight down, what you tend to find is the exhaust just swings side to side like that. They need to actually be pulled in to stop the exhaust from swinging around and just take up the up and down movement. So now that we've got those on, we've got the kind of V-band lined up, we'll mark the location of it. Not that it matters too much because we can still adjust it. But then we'll work out what hanger brackets we need. We'll probably, again, just some more 12mm bar, a couple of bends in it, just to pull that in. Well, tack it on the car, take it off, weld it up. Yeah, and then we can pretty much start on the over axle section then. All welded on and the rear hanger brackets on now on that centre section. So now it's a case of trimming this kind of over axle section down that we talked about earlier. And we're not going to put another joint in this until basically just before the back box, which is probably going to start somewhere around here. So now we need to, yeah, kind of figure out this over axle section. On the last one of these I did 2 60-degree bends. The problem is, in 3.5-inch pipework, the easiest bends to get are what we'd call a 1.2D centerline radius, which is fairly tight, but probably not really tight enough. So I'm going to try it and see what I think, because I can't remember exactly when the last time we did it, if I was 100% happy with it or not. But if not, we'll have to do some pie cuts, and then we can kind of cut whatever centerline radius we want. So this is kind of an example of how that bit will come together. We'll have one piece on the end there, which will take us, up towards going over the axle, and then we'll have another piece on the top there. But yeah, I think we're going to need some pie cuts to get that first section done. We can do them quite tight then. So yeah, it's going to be a case of cutting this down. We can roughly say where we're going to cut this down now, because we can basically line it up with the edge of this heat shield, because that's when the bend's going to start. And then what we'll do is we'll put a bend in place, and then probably end up cutting some pies, and then just see what we think. Right, so we've got some pie cuts cut, and we've tacked a few together just to see, what direction we're going in. We know which direction we're going in, but just to give us something to play with. Cut this down to what is pretty much the right length now, so I can't cut any more off this piece now without the kind of piece that's going to curve around the fuel tank starting to touch that heat shield. We just need to get it super tight to that heat shield, because obviously as the exhaust gets hotter, it'll get longer. The stainless expands when it gets hot. So we just need to make sure that we keep it as tight realistically as we can. Obviously there's going to be engine movement as well. The engine will rock backwards and forwards, which will pull the exhaust backwards and forwards. So we do need a bit of clearance, but given that this is quite big diameter pipework and it doesn't really fit over the beam very well, I'd rather cheat too much space going forwards and maybe have it knock a little bit on the heat shield when the engine's cold, but as soon as the exhaust has got some temperature in it and it's grown a few millimeters, you'll lose that knock-in. So we're basically just going to aim that up towards, there's like a little scallop in the rear seat bench area, and that's basically where the other bends will go. So we can tack this on here and roughly know whereabouts it's going to go. I've taped a piece of straight on just to give me, again, another idea of kind of pointing it in the right direction. But until we can't really go that much further until we've got a silencer made up now, because we kind of need something to aim at. Where the inlet is to the silencer is obviously quite a specific position. So we need to make sure that what we're doing here will allow us to get to where we need to go, because we have to kind of think a bit further ahead than where we are at the minute. So I think at this moment in time, what we'll do is we'll just line this up with that scallop, mark it, put a couple of tacks on here, leave it at that. Then we'll get that silencer made up, which we're going to use an 8-inch body silencer. Get that silencer made up, stick it roughly in the position we think it wants to go, and then we can try and make the pipework all match up. Right, so we've got a silencer made up now, and what we're trying to establish is in which orientation do we need to have this section coming up over the beam. So we know we're going to have to aim it towards this scallop under the rear seat bench to get the most height out of it, but we will need to come back down again to get into the silencer. Because we're using such a big 8-inch body silencer, the entry is actually quite low, which is great for on the other side, because it means we miss out that awkward bit of body seam that sticks down on the Astras, but it does make it a bit harder here because we've kind of got to get up and over the rear beam. So it's going to involve a few more pie cuts to get back over the beam into that scallop, and then we'll probably just get away with a normal, it'd probably be about a 30-degree bend, because we had a 22-degree bend here, but because we've because we point the exhaust over this way as it goes over the beam, we actually add a few more degrees onto that. So again, I'm pretty sure I normally use about a 30-degree bend going over there. So yeah, it'll kind of end up looking something like that, and then yeah, back over onto the axle. So just a case of playing around with a few more pie cuts now, getting this over axle piece sorted out and pointed in the direction of the rear silencer. So we've got hanger brackets mounted on now, and got some reinforcements on, and we've put in this V-band in the end. So this is where we're going to put our tip section on now. We're just going to have the V-band tip, so just so that in the future, if we want to change anything, it's a little bit easier. We don't have to kind of chop up the end of the silencer. Again, we can leave it all on the car. I'm fairly confident this is going to be, as it is now, you know, more than quite enough for any UK track. But if we wanted to, we can have an additional silencer along the back of the car, and we just got to basically fabricate that section. So what we're going to do for a tip is we're just going to do just like a plain turn down tip now, because there's no rear diffuser on the car or anything like that. Again, it means it's easy, we can change in the future, and by actually turning it down, you do actually knock a few more decibels off that way as well. And we're not really interested in a fancy exhaust tip anymore. So we've got another V-band. All we need to do is start putting some bends on the end of here, basically. So we'll probably just get an offcut of bend and yeah, weld it on. Right, tip's bolted on now, so we're basically all there. Just a case of starting it up, checking if there's any leaks, which there shouldn't be. So that's the beauty of V-bands. We've got plenty of clearance on everything. I can give it all a good shake and it's not knocking. So that's pretty good for a 3.5-inch system. So yeah, just a case of getting it started up and checking for leaks now. And then yeah, we're ready for Brands Hatch. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and we'll see you next time.